But now, what about the carbon emissions of coal-fired plants anyway? And on the other hand, the argument in South Africa goes something like this, that we've got a huge supply, right, and access to coal, that it's a resource that we have, we should use it, and that is why coal-fired plants will be with us for some time to come.
I agree with this, but we're talking about a larger problem here. We're actually talking about climate change, and coal, you could say, is actually one of the largest contributors to climate change. South Africa has the 14th highest greenhouse gas emissions in the world, and this is the world we're talking about. Being the 14th highest polluter with greenhouse gas emissions is a big thing for a country like South Africa. Coal provides 88% of the power of the energy mix in South Africa. If we were to put some wind in the mix, for example, we could really help and reduce this carbon emission mix. And why is it important we reduce this carbon emission mix? There's recently been an exhibition that's been touring around the world, and they've dealt with places to remember before they disappear. What struck me with this is that there's a region close to Cape Town, the Cape Floral region. It's full of different plants, different fauna, etc. And this region, we're actually expecting by 2050 is going to have a temperature rise of about 1.8 degrees Celsius, which could eliminate up to about 30% of the plant species. Which is a big problem for us, and we have the knowledge, the power, and the ability to change this now, and maybe to protect a part of South Africa from disappearing.
Right, let's go to the lines. Gavin from Mainstream Renewable Power, South Africa. Good morning to you, Gavin.
Good morning to you, and thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
A couple of comments, and I'd just like to reply and feed into what Mo has just said. In the Western Cape, for instance, where we are based, and where we're looking at extensive development. We've got a number of projects in the Western, Eastern and Northern Cape. The evidence that South Africa is going to be very hard hit by climate change is already there. You see what's happening in the Southern Cape, the extreme, unpredictable weather events that are starting, and you start to speak to the farmers and get an understanding of what's happening to the flower industry, what's happening with the wildfires that rage and destroy issues. So those industries that are affected, they are starting to feel these slow creeping changes. So when we look at it as an industry player and we see an opportunity, we see South Africa, we see in this whole mix of things, when we talk about power, the Finnish power station at the moment, the nuclear power station, which is one of the only ones currently supposedly trying to get ahead from a construction point of view worldwide, we're looking at 10 million euros per megawatt. So I just wanted to give Doug Cooney that figure. When we look at wind power and what we can do, we're working roughly around a 1.4 to 1.5 million euros per megawatt. Now, when people just look at the capital cost, it says cheaper than nuclear. When we look at coal-fired power stations and we look at Medupi, we're looking at 26 million rand per megawatt. When I look at wind power in South Africa, I look at 17 to 18 million rand per megawatt. So the numbers there to make sense to me. But what's more important from a country point of view is that what never gets factored into this equation is how we de-risk the economy. Because we're sitting in a very vulnerable energy supply situation. We do have coal, but if you look at what all the producers are saying and you look at the lifetimes that we have, some people are predicting that up until 2035 is the time frame within which we'll be able to commercially extract coal as a resource. After that, the question is, what do we do?
All right, Gavin, thanks very much. No, I'm sorry, I have to pause there at least. If you don't mind, you can hold on for the next couple of minutes. Gavin from Mainstream Renewable Power, SA, Yaj, Cape Town, Edwin, Belfast, I'll be coming to you in a few minutes. And we're talking about energy issues here. There's African Utility Week conference going to be held next week. A whole number of high-powered people dealing with power issues are going to be meeting in Durban. And they will be looking at optimizing the performance of the energy sectors of the different countries on the continent. Claire Flok-Vane is the Project Director, African Utility Week, and Doug Cooney, MD, Independent Power Producers Association, and Mo Siddiqui is with Suzlon, and he's talking to us from Denmark. Gavin, you're still on the earlier on, so can you conclude your thoughts, please?
Yeah, Tim, just the important thing about de-risking our economy as a developing country. Remember that your fossil fuel and your uranium of volatile fossil fuels that need to be extracted, and we don't know what their price is going to be over time. With every kilowatt hour or megawatt hour of renewable energy that you put in, particularly your free fuel, number one, it is free, so you don't have a fuel cost forever, so it's predictable. And number two is you're able to manage that much more cleverly into the economy because it eventually forces down the prices of your fossil fuels, so it has a net impact in your electricity system of lowering the overall wholesale price. And my last point is that often we hear people saying there isn't a significant wind resource in South Africa. We've just completed a 4.5-week study which we looked at the wind resource in South Africa, and the interesting thing about the wind resource is that it exactly mirrors the demand pattern in South Africa, which is something people have not taken into effect, which means you can use wind power effectively to lop off all your peaks at very least, which means instead of using expensive open cycle gas turbines which are running at about 3 Rand a kilowatt hour, we can use the refit, that feed-in tariff that the other participants are talking about earlier, and your wind is going to cost you 1.25 Rand. To my mind, 1.25 Rand versus 3 Rand, I'd rather pick cleaner energy with all its benefits and de-risk the economy for 1.25 Rand than dirty fossil fuels with all its risks for the economy into the future. So that makes sense for us from a PowerPoint of view.
Thank you. And yeah, you're in Cape Town. Welcome.
Morning, Tim. Morning to your guests. I'm speaking on behalf of ASPO, that's the Association for the Study of Peak Oil in South Africa. And we believe that renewable energy is the way to go, not just for climate change, but also for the whole issue of peak oil and energy security. Now, recently, there's been a task force in the UK, fronted by Sir Richard Branson and various other business chief executives there, who have warned the UK government of an oil crunch in 5 years' time. Now, we are in a position where we are at the point of peak global oil production. We're facing decline in oil supplies in the near future, and that's going to impact on our energy security and energy supplies and energy mix. Fossil fuels are unsustainable in the long term. If we're going to have to power our cars through electric vehicles, we're going to need more electricity generation. So that's one factor. If we're going to electrify our public transport system in rail and etc., we're going to need more electricity generation. So it is vital that even ESCOM invest directly in renewable energy power stations themselves. Furthermore, we need fiscal support for renewable energy through a carbon tax. At the same time, we've got to give relief to the consumer on the VAT side and income tax side. And we need to support the renewable energy industry, reshape the way people invest and spend the money and conserve electricity, energy efficiency, all of that. This requires, Tim, I'm pleading to you to devote a couple of your shows to discussing peak oil, the implications for energy security, for economic development.
Well, I'm curious about it. I know you've mentioned it a few times. So, yeah, stay on the line. Let's take your contact details if we do not have them. But I'm very much interested from, just the learning point of view at least. Edwin Belfast, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim. Look, we've heard our friend from Denmark talk about nuclear waste and saying we don't quite know what to do. We don't know what to do with it. It's the most filthy method of producing power, and you can't just dispose of stuff that's got 400,000-year half-life like that. But we're facing very exciting times now. The power production, as with anything else, should be benign, sustainable, and mutually profitable, not the socialist state lobster pot sucking stuff out of people, and it's be giving a service. I encourage people to look up on Google, if they go to the internet cafe or at home, and you must do it yourself, free energy, and you'll see how many people in the past have been murdered or had their businesses ruined for coming up with things such as free energy. It's available for everybody to look at, and now we're seeing people running around in the Eastern Cape here with cars running on water. 1 cup of water contains 300 times the amount of energy that a cup of petrol does.